Are you tired of boring Necromancer builds? Do you want to have fun? Do you miss Corpse Explosion? In that case, I've got a build for you. Hello everybody, my name is Zen and welcome to my build guide for a build that I call the Corpse Party. It's a ridiculous build, so it needed a ridiculous intro, and this thing is so much freaking fun to play. It is really good at farming T13 quickly, and you can play it in Greater Rifts. It's not so great there just because of the limitations of Corpse Explosion, but we all used Corpse Explosion leveling up and we knew how fun it was, but none of the endgame builds are using it, so I figured I would make one that is viable with it. This build utilizes the 6-piece bonus from the Inarius set, so when you have bone armor on, your Corpse Explosion is just going to do a ridiculous amount of damage. And you got to get the party started by finding a corpse or having a corpse to start with. But once you have one corpse, you'll be able to blow that corpse up, kill a dude, which will then give you more corpses, and so on and so forth. So you generate this really fun momentum as you're going through the rift, and you're able to clear incredibly quickly. So let's start with the gear, then we'll move on to the skills, and then at the end we'll talk about the playstyle and how to execute it properly. So starting with the gear, you're using the Inarius set, so you need pretty much every single piece minus the gloves. I'll talk about that in a second. They are the shoulders, the helm, the chest, the pants, and the boots are the pieces that you need. On top of that, you will need a Ring of Royal Grandeur, which you get from Act 1 bounties. You can either wear it or put it in Kanai's Cube. That is completely up to you. Using the Ring of Royal Grandeur, that will give you your 6-piece bonus, which is kind of what we need in order to do any of our damage, because you will be missing those gloves. So the gloves that you're going to be using instead are one of two. Ideally, you'll be using the Moribund gauntlets, which is the gauntlets that make it so your golem sheds a corpse every second. So as long as you have a golem out, every single second that it is out, a corpse will be falling off of it. So that generates the corpses for you passively that you'll need in order to kind of get the party started. But outside of that, you'll also need the Grasps of Essence, which it says when an exploded corpse damages at least one enemy, which it pretty much will in every case here, your Corpse Explosion deals 100% increased damage for 6 seconds, stacking up to 5 times. You'll ideally want this one in Kanai's Cube because it has a percentage on it that can go pretty low. So if you can put it in the cube, you get the 100% no matter what, whereas the Moribund gauntlets, they don't have any percentile, so as long as you're wearing those, you'll get the full damage bonus from the Grasps of Essence. For your weapons, you will want Rylina's Shadow Hook, which increases your damage based on every single point of maximum essence that you have. This weapon rolls with max essence, so it's pretty good by itself, but then you could put more max essence in with your paragon points, and then there's a passive. We'll talk about that when we get to the skills, but for the most part, this is a very strong weapon. The second weapon you want is Trag'Oul's Corroded Fang. It makes it so Curse Scythe rune on Grim Scythe has a 100% chance to apply a curse, but we're not using Grim Scythe, so we don't care about that. We want the second part on this, which is it makes it so you deal 200% increased damage to cursed enemies, and we're always going to have enemies cursed with this build, so you just gain 200% increased damage. It's very good. Ideally, you want Trag'Oul's in the cube and Rylina's in your hands, but if you get like a really good Trag'Oul's, then you can wear it and wear a shield or any phylactery that you want. That's completely up to you. There are many different options, none of which are super good for this build, but you know, they'll increase your damage if you get a good offhand. For the Shadow Hook, it gives you a lot of damage because it is a two-handed weapon, but again, if you have a good Trag'Oul's, you can kind of switch them back and forth, which one is in the cube and which one you're wearing on your person. We already mentioned that you want a Ring of Royal Grandeur as one of your rings. You could either have that on your person or in the cube, that's up to you. The other two rings that you want are Avarice Band, which is just fantastic for speed farming. You could swap this out with a Unity if you're solo and you're dying a lot. Ideally, you won't be dying a lot because of some of the other things we'll run, but if you find yourself a little squishy, you can run Unity. In groups, you'll probably want to run Avarice Band. There's a couple other options. This one is a free slot to move in and out. It's pretty flexible. For your other ring, you want Crisbin's Sentence. It increases your damage on slowed or stunned enemies. It's very good. Again, either put that in the cube or have it on your person. Ideally, if you get a really good roll, you can have it on your person. Otherwise, you probably would want it in the cube. Your amulet slot is also very flexible. You can pretty much put whatever you want in there. It could be a traveler's pledge, and you can have a compass rose instead of the avarice band, or you could just put anything else. But what I like running isn't necessary, but it is really nice, is the Johnstone. Each corpse consumed while you're in your land of the dead grants a stack of macabre knowledge, and macabre knowledge increases the damage of corpse lance and corpse explosion, the second part being the most important part, by 200% while outside of land of the dead. So you pop your land of the dead, you consume a ton of corpses, obviously, with your corpse explosion, you're gaining stacks of macabre knowledge, and then once you get to the end of your land of the dead buff, you'll have all these additional 200% damage bonus corpse explosions. It's really good. It's not necessary, but I really like it. Your bracer slot is another slot that is extremely flexible. You can kind of run whatever you want in there, but there are some things that I would highly suggest. So if you need more speed, Warzetchi and arm guards are really good. You'll be destroying things all the time to get that speed bonus based on all of your corpse explosions or the crazy aura that you have from Inarius set. If you need maybe a bit more Death's Breath, you can run Nemesis Bracer, so every time you hit a pylon, you're spawning a rare group, which gives you more corpses, so it all works out really well with that. Or you may find yourself in a situation that I have where I don't have any passive generation on Essence, which means when I use my Bone Armor, I'm eventually draining myself dry, and then I won't be able to use Bone Armor again, which is unfortunate because it's necessary to cast with this build. So instead, I use Reaper's Wraps. There's tons of health globes to go around, which will give you all of that Essence back, and you will never have to worry about the Essence. If you can find some sort of passive generation on Essence, any other Bracer will do. I feel like the gold wrap is the least flexible slot that you can have here. We're going to be running gold wrap, which increases your armor for 5 seconds equal to the amount of gold that you're picking up, which is really, really good for staying alive. This also doesn't just fall off after 5 seconds. So if you pick up gold over the course of 10 seconds, based on the amount of gold and when you picked it up, it will slowly drop off. So if you picked up gold 5 seconds ago, that gold is going to fall off, but the gold you picked up 6 seconds ago is still going to be on as a buff. So it is a really nice way to keep a really powerful damage reduction effect on your character. If you plan on running Greater Rifts, obviously Gold Wrap is awful because nothing drops gold in Greater Rifts. So instead, you can try a couple different builds. You have Razor Strop, which is every time you pick up a health globe, you release an explosion that deals 400% weapon damage as fire to all enemies within 20 yards, which is pretty good. It's not bad. It's an interesting belt that nobody really uses, but I think it works well for this build. Then you have the Insatiable Belt. Picking up a health globe increases your max life for 5% for 15 seconds, stacking up to 5 times. Or you could switch it out for Dainty's Binding, which is just a pretty good damage reduction belt, which kind of serves the same purpose as the Gold Wrap, just not to that great of an effect in Greater Rifts. For your legendary gems, you'll want Bane of the Trapped. It's a pretty normal go-to gem. It's very, very good. It's very, very powerful. And because you'll be within melee range of things, everything will be getting this effect. So you'll be just doing a massive amount of extra damage to things. The second gem you'll want is Boon of the Hoarder, which when you have it at max rank 50, it has a 100% chance on killing an enemy to cause an explosion of gold, and picking up that gold will give you a movement speed boost for 2 seconds. This obviously synergizes really, really well with Avarice Band and with Gold Wrap. It means that you'll be basically unkillable, and you'll see some ridiculous damage reduction numbers when you're picking up all your gold. So once you get the party started and you're running through and you just have this crazy momentum, you will be unkillable. The last gem slot can be pretty much anything you want. You know, do you have some damage reduction issues, which hopefully you don't using Gold Wrap? I mean, you could use Esoteric Alteration, you can use Molten Wildebeest, you could use a lot of different things here. I personally use Gogok Swiftness, which basically gives you attack speed, which is not very important with this, and dodge, which is okay for 4 seconds, but with the 25 rank, it increases your cooldown by 1% per stack of swiftness, so it goes up to 15 times. So you get 15% cooldown reduction, which is really good for making sure your Land of the Dead and Bone Armor are always off of cooldown. Some other gems that work well, you can use Wreath of Lightning. It's a bit more damage, a bit more movement speed, and Bane of the Powerful also works well because you'll be killing a lot of elites, so you'll be gaining just a flat, huge percentile damage for a very long amount of time. What you enchant your gear with doesn't really matter too much. There's a lot of different things that you can put on there. You know, obviously having intellect and having life are pretty good because that will keep you alive longer, make you do more damage. Crit damage, critical hit chance, those are pretty key. Outside of that, there's really nothing that you're looking forward to. You know, percentage damage isn't going to be that big of a deal. You can go for poison damage, though, if you have the option. If not, I wouldn't really stress too much about it. When it comes to paragon points, obviously movement speed is really important, so is maximum essence. As far as offense, you probably want cooldown reduction over critical hit chance, critical hit damage, but then those two are next up, followed by attack speed, obviously. Defense doesn't really matter. You can choose any one of those to start with this build. And then in utility, you'll want that gold find. The gold find is really nice. Resource cost reduction is okay. Area damage is great, and life per hit is okay. That covers the gear, so now let's talk about the skills. So because you're using the Inarius set, you're gonna need bone armor. This is what gives you the crazy damage bonus, and it gives you a pretty nice damage reduction. The bone armor that I use is Dislocation, which stuns all the enemies, which works well with Crispin's Sentence, the ring, but you can use pretty much any other rune if you really want to. They're all pretty good, they're all okay, I should say, but I think Dislocation is going to be the go-to rune here. Next, you'll want to run Corpse Explosion. I mean, after all, this is a Corpse Explosion build. This is going to be your main source of damage. The rune that I like the most here is Close Quarters, which makes it so 5 corpses nearby are exploded and deal a crazy amount of damage. This is really good for burst damage, but all of the runes here work. Final Embrace is really fun because the corpse actually get up and run to the target, then blow up, but it does cost health. So if you can feel that you're surviving long enough, then Final Embrace is great. Otherwise, I really like Close Quarters. In order to get the damage bonus from the Trag'Oul's weapon, we'll want a curse. You can run whatever curse you really want to, but what I suggest is Frailty with the Aura of Frailty. It just means that enemies essentially have 15% less HP, and by the way, this aura that you have around you will increase in radius when you use your Avarice Band with the gold pickup and everything. So it works really well with that. It means that all enemies around you are essentially cursed and are essentially taking 200% weapon damage. So that weapon is an effect that is essentially passive for us. We don't really have to think about it too much. In order to get around, I use Blood Rush. Blood Rush is just a great ability. In this case, you can use any rune that you want, but I suggest using Molting. When you use Blood Rush with Molting, you will put a corpse down at your location that you left, which means you don't necessarily have to Blood Rush a super far distance away. You can Blood Rush just an inch in front of you, and then you have a corpse to use. This is a really good way of getting the momentum started. If your golem is being stupid and fighting something else, you can put a corpse down with your Blood Rush and then start the little kickoff of the party from there. Speaking of your dumb golem, he can either be the party maker or the party crasher. So you're going to run the Fleshed Golem, which just, when you use your golem, it'll put down 8 corpses down on the ground. It's great. Means that you have corpses to use, right? Plus the gloves that you're using means that you have 1 corpse falling out of him every second. So he is just a walking corpse machine, and you're going to use him to get things started or to kill rare groups. You know, you activate him on top of a rare group, and then you have a ton of corpses to blow up, especially as you're moving very quickly through a rift. So it works really well with him. Unfortunately, he can also be a party pooper. He can run off in some random direction and be killing one lone mob way off in the distance. And it doesn't really matter because, I mean, he's dropping corpses there. You can just run over and kill the mob real quick, but he sometimes has a hard time following you. Learning how to control him is just something that you'll get the feel for. Otherwise, just using his active effect to bring him over to you or put him where you need him works really, really well. And then with your cooldown reduction, if you can get as much as you can, then that means that the Flesh Golem is going to be off of cooldown quicker, which means you'll be able to reposition him better. Finally, we want Land of the Dead with whatever rune you want. Shallow Graves works well and increases the time on it. Invigoration is not really that useful because we're not spending essence. Land of the Plenty heals you, but you won't really need the heals. Frozen Lands freezes everything, which is great if you want to proc Crispin's Sentence, quad damage off of it. Otherwise, I just use Plague Lands because it is doing 10,000% weapon damage, which means that that weapon damage is effectively killing things, generating more corpses for me after, Land of the Dead is done. Plus, this works with the Johnstone, which is increasing the amount of damage that Corpse Explosion does every single time you use it while Land of the Dead is active. This is really good for taking out Rift Guardians or big groups of enemies when you don't have a lot of corpses yet, or just for using on solo rare groups. For passives, you'll obviously want Overwhelming Essence. This increases your max essence by 40%, which works really well with the Shadow Hook weapon. Standalone works pretty well here if you need a bit more armor. It increases your armor by 100%, and it's reduced by 10% for each active minion. So you only have one active minion, so you're getting 90% armor. There are some other things that you can use here if you really want to. I like Standalone. I think it works well. Then I use Life from Death, which is whenever you consume a corpse, which is always, because that's what you're doing to generate your damage, is you have a 20% chance to spawn a health globe, which makes sure that my Reaper's Wraps are doing something when I don't have any passive generation of essence, that is. Plus, it keeps you healed up in case you take any damage, because there's just going to be life globes everywhere. The final passive I feel is pretty necessary. I don't think you'll be able to switch it out, which it reduces the cooldown on Command Golem by 30%, which means you'll be able to move him around a lot more often and get more corpses when you need it. The other passives that are potential here, you can run Dark Reaping, and this will give you 2% essence and life per kill. You'll be killing things a lot, which is a substitute for running Reaper's Wraps. I have tried it, it works just fine. It's just I wanted to use some of the other passives and try that out. So Dark Reaping is a really good option here, especially if you want to switch it out for maybe Standalone or even Life from Death. I think Life from Death would be the best one to switch out because you're not going to need the healing from the health globes at that rate, and you're not going to need the essence from the life globes, so Dark Reaping works as a nice substitute. And then you can run whatever bracers you want. Some other ones is Spreading Malediction, gives you 1% damage bonus for each enemy afflicted by one of your curses, and because your Aura of Frailty will be huge based on the amount of gold you're picking up, a lot of things will be cursed. Unfortunately, they die too quick to really justify using in a T13 situation where you're just killing things super quick. Another option is using this in a Greater Rift where you'll have a lot of enemies around. There isn't really much else that you can use here. I think Blood is Power is pretty good, and that just reduces your cooldowns by 20% essentially, but the problem is you won't be taking too much damage once you have your crazy gold buff. This is another one that might be good for Greater Rifts. And then Final Service, if you're running hardcore, I would highly suggest using. It's your save from death. Let's round this off by talking about the playstyle. So you'll Blood Rush in, and you will instantly Bone Armor a ton of targets. This will give you your Bone Armor stacks, which obviously is giving you damage reduction, but it also means that it's doing quite a bit of damage because Bone Armor gets a pretty significant damage bonus with the Inarius set. Usually this will kill at least one thing, which means you can just kind of get the momentum started on doing Corpse Explosion and killing more stuff. Ideally, if you don't have the damage here, what you would then hit is your Golem first. So you would hit your Golem cooldown, he'll run in, put a ton of corpses down. That will then give you the rest of the momentum you need to kill things if you're not quite able to do it just yet. Past that, you'll want to save Land of the Dead for a rare group if you can. And if you feel like you're losing momentum, it's another option to get that momentum back. Outside of that, you're not really having to worry much about Aura of Frailty. It's doing its thing passively. You're not really having to worry much about your gold pickup because with Avarice Band, that will be picked up passively. Plus, if you have a pet out, obviously that will be picked up passively. So there's a lot going on here that I think is pretty easy to handle, and you're not really having to worry about much. The one thing that you want to do is keep moving. You want to keep that gold wrap buff on, and you want to keep killing things as quickly as possible. This build relies on that momentum, and the moment you start losing that momentum is the moment you're going to start dying. So there's a significant amount of aggression that you have to actually exert in order to get this build to work properly. In Greater Rifts, it's going to play a little bit different. You may have to consider your options of, when you're pulling extra things and when you're not. Ideally, when things start dying, things are going to start dying very, very quickly. But in Greater Rifts, you're going to run into issues of living. And there's a couple other items that you can throw in there or gems in order to live longer. But this, I think, works best when farming T13. But that wraps up the build. There isn't really much more to talk about here. It is a very fun build. It's really interesting to play, and it gets to use that skill that we all loved using leveling up, and we weren't able to use since then because of the way that the ramping works on it. But, I mean, once you get used to how it plays, you'll move really fast through rifts, and it is a way more exciting way of clearing things than having to do all these boring builds. Fortunately, if you want to run higher greater rifts, you're going to have to obviously find a different build or maybe adapt this one. If you can adapt this one, I would love to hear about your success in greater rifts because I think it would be really fun and really cool. But in the description of this video, I posted links to the build on various different sites, so you can use those as a reference in case you don't want to, scroll back through the video. And it also means that you can use that while you're leveling up in this next season, or while you're just in the middle of playing. You can look at it and reference the build there. But I want to hear from you guys. Let me know in the comments what you guys thought of the build. Did you find it fun? Is there anything that you tweaked? Because I would love to make adjustments to the build, make it even better, maybe make it so it is Greater Rift viable, and that when the next season launches, I'll be playing it a ton more than I thought I would. Either way, this is my favorite build so far, and it is one that I will love and enjoy running for many months to come. But with that being said, we shall see you guys next time.